So some of these amazingly smart people are going to be coming up next. I'm going to start with Manish Bhandari. Now, Manish has done some great work in investing in his own way, and what I'd like to do is kind of talk to him a little bit about the unique insights that being a doctor, being a practicing clinician, bring to his investment process. And with that, Manish, can you hear me? Can we hear you?
Hi, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. I was worried because you were dropping connection briefly, but it appears you're there loud and clear now. So Manish, tell me a little bit about this. So one of the things that I find so interesting is we keep talking over and over again about making sure you're talking to the right people when you're looking for expertise. It's been a common theme that's run throughout this entire session. And I'd like to ask from you, in your experience in making investments, how valuable has been your doctor's point of view, as it were?
I think where we see problems in the clinic or in the OR in the hospital every day, you understand the pain points that happen in either healthcare delivery or issues that patients face every day as part of their life. And so often we clinicians have seen, wouldn't it be great if we had that? Wouldn't it be great if we had this? And necessity is the mother of invention. So I think just from a perspective of both being able to humanize and see if I was a patient, what would make my life better? Or as a provider, what can I do that makes me more efficient? And what can I use to either make my job easier or my patient's life better? If you simply ask those basic questions, I think you start to be able to filter out something that'll have immediate impact in adoption in the marketplace as to something that may struggle through over a longer time horizon. And I
So if
think
I
most
were,
of the entrepreneurs that who are joined this and have done this, often they've exactly felt that in their daily professional or personal life and brought an innovation. Yeah.
So to put it a slightly different way as well, one of the problems we often see with medical devices in particular is this concept of solutions looking for a problem as opposed to the other way around. So you working on the front line have a better view of what are the actual problems that need to be solved.
Sure.
Okay. And then like looking at it from the other side, like you have a wide range of companies that you've invested in over the years. Can you give us an example of like situations where having that doctor or clinician expertise has given you an extra edge or a different point of view in terms of how to support those companies after you've made that investment?
Yeah, traditionally where we come in is we want to see a technology that is developed and where we can bring it to the clinic, where patients, we can try out, we can add value from a clinician perspective in a trial or the clinical development. Um, Case in point, maybe we have an investment in a startup out of Cleveland called Muriva. Being a cancer doctor, I see patients suffer through a lot of side effects of radiation and chemotherapy. One particular problem is mucositis, which are sores in the mouth. Head and neck cancer patients or bone marrow transplant patients have a lot of that. There was technology already developed, publications showing the value of photobiomodulation. All the startup did was to make it practical and invent the right tools and silicone mouthpieces to deliver it effectively to patients. So we partnered with them to bring it to clinic. And while we were skeptics, and you have to be in healthcare early on because it's very hard to change biology, so you have to have a skeptic's hat. But we were very, very motivated to bring this because it's a very significant patient problem for patients who undergo these treatments. And very encouraged to see how well it is performing in clinic in the early clinical trials. So when we see a big problem, patients suffer, something that has some literature and biological or scientific basis to work, and to be able to offer that to our patients and finally see it work, there's nothing like that. It's very motivating. That's what makes you excited to work with startups and founders and engineers. You're trying to solve a significant clinical problem where it can have a huge impact on a global scale for patients with that problem.
Got it. Thank you. With that, I'm actually going to start bringing in some of our other roundtable participants, some of my other favorite doctors in the world, especially because they don't have to examine me. We can just talk about cool ideas. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite cynics, meaning that Manish has been actually.
Oh, they're examining you, Mike. Make no mistake.
Actually, Mark and DJ are both extremely cynical, but I'm going to start with Mark first, just because he was nodding so energetically about Manish's comment about being skeptical. And talk to me a little bit, Mark, about your experience with evaluating companies and what you think about when you're looking at them from that standpoint.
Yeah, great. First of all, great meeting. It really been fun. I've learned a lot from the different perspectives. And I think that's kind of one of the points that I want to bring forward is that investing in healthcare and making sure that innovation comes to market really requires us to be multilingual. And we need to be able to tell the story in multiple ways. And one of the things that I really enjoy doing is working with entrepreneurs, working with our early stage companies and helping them tell their story. You mentioned earlier that one of the biggest problems plaguing healthcare innovation is a solution in search of a problem. So we like to ensure that they ask that innovators that are doctorpreneurs ask a couple of fundamental questions, like what's the problem that the patient is having? What's the problem that the clinical team is having that needs to be solved? And who's going to be happy that that problem is going to be solved? And who's going to pay to make that patient happy? So you really have to have, a human lens to think like a patient. You have to be able to speak like a patient. You have to have an operational lens to understand the impact of, what's going to be the impact on the team and the workflows and sort of the day-to-day life of delivering this innovation in the clinic, and what's the financial impact? Who's going to pay for this? Whose budget is it coming from? And those are just a couple of the things that we like to think about. And so, what I like to really focus on is the patient and the physician, and this notion that medicine is unbelievably rewarding, and it's our job as innovators to really restore the joy to medicine and to make sure that when people say that the healthcare system is broken, whatever they mean by that we're not losing sight of the great work that's being done in the clinics. And our job is to make that work easier and make it easier for both the patient and the people who are treating them.
I love what you just said there, because, one of the things that we're looking at with the Impact Investing Summit is this idea that there are so many target-rich environments for positive social impact in healthcare. And one of them is the systematic aspects of trying to help reduce the friction points to innovation, or helping us bring innovation to market faster. That's going to be one of the topics of our town hall channels, is about removing friction points to innovation, both in the digital space and in the ecosystem. But I do want to stay on topic here. And DJ, I promised he was my other favorite cynic, so I'm going to bring him on next. DJ, one of the things that I kind of found interesting is just you have a specialty, and yet the investments that you make are often far outside your specialty. And how is it that you're able to gain access to that? Do you rely on other doctors in your area, like friends of yours, in order to gain access, or is it self-education? What do you do? What do you do to gain access and information?
So, it's a great question, and one that I think a lot of physicians who are interested in investing ask. And I've found, and I'm sure you would agree, I'm sure everybody in the panel would agree, that networking is the best way to get to investments. It takes, getting involved with Angel MD. One avenue is going to Pitch Club, contacting the companies directly, networking with some of the people who are also in the groups, and it builds out. I mean, I've been doing it for over a decade now, and I had access through one physician friend who was a startup investor. That's where I started. I got 2 investments through him and his network. One went to zero, and one is still ongoing after about 12 years now. But from that, the networking started, and then now I turn down investments regularly because the deal flow has increased from a bunch of different angles. But one thing I'd like to add, though, if I can, real quick, just to what some of the other folks were saying and Mark was saying,
Please.
One of the interesting things that I find in healthcare, and why I think physician involvement in the companies is really important, is everything you said. A problem, an answer looking for a problem. I've seen that where companies have come to me wanting investments where somebody completely outside of healthcare thinks they can do it better, but yet they don't understand the operational aspects of it, or as we've said before, a third party is paying for it and trying to get them to pay for it. And then on the flip side, though, it's a very different language to sell to a physician than to sell to a family office or a venture capital firm. So the deck that you give to a physician to try to get them to use your product or go online and sign up for your service is completely different from the one that you'd want to bring to a family office. So
because it's all in Latin, or what do you mean by that? Like, what is different about those two decks?
well, so as a physician, I'm looking for let's take a medical device, for instance. Okay. You're going to want to come to me as the physician and prove to me that it is not going to significantly change my workflow or my operation, that it's better for my patients. And then you're going to have to go to the hospital administrator who's actually buying it for me. And you and I together are going to have to go to that hospital administrator and convince them from a dollar perspective that it's reasonable and useful, not just that it works for me.
So that actually dovetails well into distribution plans, right? Because the whole point is you need to get doctor champions, not just as investors, but also as use case points.
Absolutely. And one of the other interesting things is when you look at medical devices, there's one market strategy, or there's a lot, but there's kind of one go-to-market there. You look at drugs, there's a different go-to-market there. Mm-hmm. And you look at computer platforms, and that's a whole different go-to-market strategy. So when you talk about healthcare, there's not one way to make it work. It's not like you're a car dealer and you open a new dealership and it's the same everywhere, or a donut shop. Each segment has a different go-to-market and a different strategy there. So anyway, it's fascinating. Love the space.
Well, I know I'm fascinated. It's what keeps me intellectually engaged on a daily basis here. So
yeah, hey Mike, I could just
please
just provide a slight counterpoint, because I agree with everything that was just said in terms of and I use the terminology, you kind of need to speak the language of different stakeholders within a health system, and almost you may go around, there's 5 or 6 different stakeholders, whether it's finance or supply chain, the clinical team, the nursing team, and you got to get them all to buy in. And if everyone doesn't say yes, it's not going. If one person says no, you're dead in the water. So there is that aspect of it. But the flip side is that something that I call the Marion test, and Marion's my mother-in-law. And if you have some innovation and you can't put it into simple terms to explain it to my mother-in-law, then I don't think you have a chance, right? So we have this notion in healthcare, this mythology of language and complexity.
But you don't have a chance with who? You don't have a chance with investors or with distribution, or both?
You don't have a chance to get it into the marketplace, because you've got to find within all of those different ways of talking to people the kind of common unifying purpose. How is this going to make somebody's life better? Like, what's the story, right? And physicians, the word doctor means teacher. It comes from the Latin for teacher. And, our job has to be to educate people in terms of what's the story here? Like, what is the real simple humanity? How are we improving humanity? And if we're talking about social impact, there's a lot of ways to make marginal dollars in healthcare, a lot of ways to make things marginally better. What interests me most is being able to tell a story about how we're going to actually improve patients' lives, and tell it in a way that almost everybody can rally around.
Well, I guess that's my question.
I couldn't agree with you guys more if I can pitch in. I think it's critical for startup founders to know all of your stakeholders and answer the so what. What for every one of them. It's hard to develop technology, but especially in healthcare, it's very hard to commercialize technology because you're changing some standard of care. You're disrupting something else. So really know, once your product's fully developed and you show the proof of concept and works in clinic, for each stakeholder, whether it be the doctor, the patient, the payer, the hospital administrator, the insurance guy, the nurse, how are you going to really appeal to them and what's your commercialization pathway? That's critical. That's critical. And companies really struggle, including the majors, whether it be Medtronic or whether it be J&J. So what and how are you really going to introduce a product, a pharma drug? How are people going to accept? So knowing the stakeholders and how do you appeal to them and commercializing it is critical.
Well, I think after talking with you guys already, like I think people can understand why it is we came up with the idea of this partnership is if all of these stakeholders all have a reason to either say yes or no and all have a decision-making process, then isn't it wise for us to actually engage them all from the start in terms of how do we promote these companies or how do we find the right solutions? And so it's that selection of solution from across the spectrum that begins it, but then there's also the support for those companies from all of those stakeholders that are available as well. So, John, we haven't really gotten to you yet. This is Dr. John Johnson. He's joined us. He's a bit of a polymath in the sense that he's done a lot of different things. He's come from the regulatory side, also worked at UCSF in terms of their innovation and incubator hub. John, based on your experience, what do you think? Give me something you disagree with that you've heard so far. Everybody wants to agree. Give me something you disagree with. Let's mix it up. Or put a finer point on something.
Well, let's see if I can get the audio. There we go.
All right.
I do agree with what has been said. I can expand a bit on some of these issues. I tend to think that I can bring a holistic approach to companies and innovation because I've worked in research, in clinicians, startup founder, managed companies, dealt with herding the cats when it deals with HR issues and all that and regulatory things. And when you look at a particular situation, you have to say, how are we going to address all components of this to make it work? Because any one blip can throw a monkey wrench in things. How I tend to approach things is more of taking existing items, existing devices, and merging ideas. For example, this morning we're working on how to improve insulin infusion pumps. And, one of the things I was working on was to make it totally implantable, like a intrathecal infusion pump and an insulin pump combination, using the same principles, but for an insulin pump. And then the CGM integrated into that and using artificial intelligence to predict glucose permutations and all that. So in my mind, it's not a leap forward. It's just an integrating of a couple technologies together because I know the pain points in each one of them. And these a lot of times have already been solved and you just follow along in someone else's footsteps. But I think what separates the medical companies and the innovation from other companies are all the stakeholders and how important they are, the third-party payers, the regulatory issues, the compliance issues, the marketing, and so many different stakeholders that you have to market to for their own particular wants and needs, and how you have to address that and sound coherent because you can't present it one way to one stakeholder and then a totally opposite way to another stakeholder.
John, you got me at hello. That's exactly what we're looking to do here. I do want to say that we're going to be running out of time on this, and I've got one question I want to throw out to all of you while we give the crowd an opportunity to put in their questions for our excellent doctor panel. And we promised to give people a view in what we think the big innovations or big trends are out there that we want to be watching for. From, we mentioned try to find a problem looking for a solution, not the reverse. So what is it that you guys think are the big problems looking for a solution, and what should we be all looking for in terms of the next investment? What should the Catalyst 2 fund be having its eyes open for companies coming through Pitch Club? Manish, let's start with you. I'm going to call on you just because you're there.
I think there are certain themes we catch where we think ultimately 10, 15 years from now, maybe sooner, technology will help patients and physicians is an immense amount of data that gets generated in patient care. And we still don't have systems to understand and digest that data intelligently in an efficient way. So companies that are really able to meet that need, that's one theme that we're searching for and continue to work with startups in that space. I clearly believe that cancer, as has been for the past decade, but also neurologic diseases, as we apply new technologies in immunotherapy and CRISPR, I think they will have an impact. And the challenge is going to be to be able to pick the ones who are going to be the winners, where you're fighting and fundamentally trying to change biology, whether it be for MS or some whole slew of neurodegenerative diseases. Cancer continues to be a big, big societal problem with so much effort and money going in, but we're going to wait and watch how does the next wave of new technologies, including CRISPR, have an impact. Those have been ones that we are trying to study and understand better.
Well, at least from the data standpoint, we actually have a course that's going to be presented from OHSU on big data analytics in medical care in terms of forward looking, where the current status is and what we're looking to do next. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, Mike, I think it's a great question. I'm going to approach it a little bit differently. I think the biggest issue in healthcare, if you go out and ask the average person, is that they see that we have feudalized the system. You go to any big city, you've got these big castles that are healthcare systems that have moats around them that are inaccessible, and they've been mysticized. Like the average person goes to a physician and turns off their brain, and so there's this mystification, this mythology of healthcare, this centralization. And I think that where we're going to see the big movement is towards demystifying healthcare, making it accessible, personalizing it, making it consumer friendly. These are the trends you're seeing. Decentralizing it, so you don't have to go to the place I spent most of my career at, the Cleveland Clinic. Like you're seeing this in other fields, like Carvana is doing to cars. And
so we're looking for disruptors, because right now that control is held very strongly by those citadels, by those castles.
Right. And so, right. And there are three pieces here. One is the access to information. Right now, information is tied up in EMRs and is very inaccessible. Two is the delivery of the actual physical product in a different way. And three is the way it's paid for. And so those three aspects are going to have to come together, because the big trend is demystification and decentralization.
Got it. Well, we will certainly put that on our radar for Catalyst 2. I'm sure you'll be seeing it. Mark's, by the way, part of the investment committee, the decision making on that fund as well. So then with DJ, what about you? What are you looking for right now? What do you think of the big trends out there that you're watching?
Well, I would agree with Mark, but the cynic in me says there's a lot of headwinds against it, and trying to figure out the winner there. Good luck, and let me know when you do, because I'll throw some money at it. But and I think the falling apart of the and I'm blanking on the name, but the Walmart and Amazon, when they came together with their healthcare venture that fell apart within 2 or 3 years, I think that kind of speaks to the headwinds that you have. Anyway, for me, it comes down to kind of three things. So in the drug space, I think, as Manish had said, the immune modulators in oncology, infectious disease, and frankly, a lot of other chronic conditions is fascinating, and is going to really change the way that diseases are treated. I think within the next 10 to 15 years, a lot of companies in that space, and just finding the right ones is always challenging. In the device space, I think miniaturization and use of the astounding technology we have at our hands. I mean, our iPhones and Androids are just astonishingly powerful, and getting devices to work with them is going to be a big push. And then on the computer side, as others have said, the big data, just using the data that we have to create better treatments for people, to pick better drugs, to pick better indications. There are several companies out there doing it, and I think doing it successfully. And I think we're moving in the right direction on that, especially with some of the legislative changes that have happened, is going to provide significantly increased access to that data. And I think you'll see some momentum in that space over the next few years.
Gotcha. I have to say, I'm a little bit disappointed that you haven't disagreed more. I mean, I'm used to more of a fight with you, DJ. It's
only
just
you,
not
Mike.
entertaining
I save it for you.
Very good. That's all right. I don't mind. I feel special then. And then, did we lose John? There he is, John. How about you? Why don't you end us off on what your vision of the future is and what you're looking for?
I think there's opportunity everywhere. You just have to be able to recognize it. And that's the difficult part. That's really the challenge, is to recognize opportunity when it presents itself. But the two areas that catch my attention, and we've already covered this, but the application of gene therapies outside of cancer treatment. I think it's just a world of opportunity there. And the other area that really excites me is longevity medicine. I think that's going to be a real compelling opportunity in the not too distant future.
Well, that's actually brings up a really good point that kind of affects one of the core premises of healthcare and cost structures in the first place, is that let's assume that tomorrow a drug was created that increased longevity for an extra 20 years. It's like, you want to know how fast Social Security implodes on us? What happens to Medicare and the Medicaid systems? I mean, it's just a destruction. So we have this countervailing point. It's like longevity means what? Longer retirements? Or does it mean that you stay youthful for longer and now you're going to retire when you're 80? Just throwing that out there, John. What do you think of that?
The key word is health span, and David Sinclair really pointed this out in his book. And that is the extension of a healthy life, not just extending the age, but extending your healthy life out into the years. And that's the key thing. And if all of us could be more productive for more years, then there would be less weight on these other programs. So that's the key. It's not just living longer, but it's living healthy longer.